If you clicked on this video, chances are you've probably seen those videos of guys saying things like, oh yeah, if you want to get that girl to text you back, just leave her on red for 3 days. Oh yeah, if you show that you're less interested in her than she's interested in you, oh yeah, that'll make her want to chase you, bro. And bro, I completely fell for this advice. Like I remember back in like late high school, early college, when I first started searching up like, oh yeah, how to talk to girls, how to go out on dates. And you'd see these videos of like these like alpha male type guys giving out advice, and they'd be saying all this stuff. And I was like, yeah, like that, that kind of makes sense because, oh, women are into bad boys, so I'm just going to behave more like that. But what I didn't realize is that by behaving in this way that wasn't authentic to me, I wasn't attracting the right kind of women. And then when I actually like came across a high quality girl who had high standards, who wanted like a relationship like that type of girl, they weren't attracted to that energy. Because really think about it, is a high quality woman going to be attracted to a man who makes her feel insecure, who makes her want to chase after them because they're not showing interest in her? No, of course not. So eventually I had a realization that like, dude, this isn't the way. Like this isn't even authentic to me. Like I'm naturally a good person. Like I'm naturally a gentleman. So why would I be like purposely leaving this girl on red just because I want to make her chase after me? Because that doesn't make any sense. And if you clicked on this video, you're probably the type of guy who like deep down, you want a long-term relationship. You want to be with a girl who shows love for you, who actually appreciates you. So if you want to attract that woman, well, you don't want to behave in this inauthentic, cold-hearted, degenerate way because you're only going to push away the women who are actually looking for a high-quality man. Bro, really quick, just think about the ideal 10 out of 10 girlfriend you could have. What are the qualities that she'd be looking for in a man? She'd probably want a guy who you would describe as like a masculine gentleman, right? A guy who's a leader, who's sure of himself, who's ambitious. And these are all like good traits that like the alpha males, you know the guys who I'm talking about, that they preach. Like, yeah, that part that they talk about is all good. But where they get it wrong is they say you should be arrogant, that you should be, cocky. When I don't think you should be arrogant and cocky, I think you should just be confident and sure of yourself. Because sure, you can also be a guy who's way too much of a nice guy, who gets walked all over, who chases after women who don't really like him, and that's also not good. There is a fine line. But I think if you want to think of kind of a good archetype for how I would describe you should try to be as a young man, I would say think of James Bond, for example, right? James Bond, he's confident. He's sure of himself, right? And I'm not saying you got to go on like some CIA secret missions or anything. That's not what I'm saying. But James Bond, right? He's confident. He's sure of himself. He, doesn't second guess himself. He's a good guy. He's a gentleman. But he's also not a nice guy. He doesn't get walked all over. He doesn't let people take advantage of him, right? If James Bond was talking to a girl and she was leaving him on red, she wasn't, showing interest in him, he would just move on and go talk to someone else. But also, he's going to be kind. He's going to be a good person. And don't get this confused. I'm not saying you should try to be like someone else. I'm not saying you should try to be like James Bond in every single way because that doesn't make any sense. That'd be really stupid. What I'm saying is that you should take some of those characteristics and only use them to become a better version of yourself, right? Because if I say like, you should be more like James Bond, I'm not saying to like pretend like you're James Bond. I'm saying be more of a masculine gentleman. If you're looking for like the perfect archetype as a young man, that's what you should strive to be like. You don't want to be like a beta male who gets walked all over, gets taken advantage of, because that's also a very bad thing. But you also don't want to be an asshole. You don't want to be arrogant. And that's what a lot of like the red pill and these like alpha male YouTubers, I think, put onto young men. They give young men the idea that you need to be cocky, you need to be arrogant, when in reality, that's not attractive to high quality women. Sure, you should be confident. You should be sure of yourself. You shouldn't let yourself get walked all over. You shouldn't just be a nice guy, but you should be kind. You should be a gentleman. And at the end of the day, I think a good question to ask yourself, and this might sound a little bit silly, but just ask yourself, what type of man would I want my daughter to date, right? Would you want your daughter to be going out with a guy who was rude, who was making her insecure, who was leaving her on red, who was being like this cocky, arrogant asshole? No, you would be like, that's not the type of guy I want my daughter to date. So then why would you be that kind of guy, right? Why would you be the type of guy that you wouldn't want your daughter to date? So you should think like, what are the qualities I would look for? Well, I'd want a guy who's, who's a gentleman, who's a good person, who's going to treat her well, who's going to make her feel loved. But also, I want a guy who's not going to get walked over. I want a guy who I know could protect my daughter, who could stand up for her, who could stand up for himself. So that's always like a kind of good question to ask yourself is, what type of guy would I want my daughter to date? But I'll see you for the next video, bro.